I hope all of you have the joy of getting old like me, because you can have the fun of struggling down the aisles and struggling up the rows and whatever. That'll be your honorable thing. If I were going to choose a portion of Scripture to start this, I would like to do it in Proverbs 24. And I'm going to use verses 3 and 4. Through wisdom is a house builded, and by understanding is it established, and by knowledge are the chambers filled with precious and pleasant riches. I have no idea why you came here tonight. I'm assuming you came just because it's Wednesday night. Just because it said it's time to come to church, so you did it. I don't know if anybody came to hear me. I hope not, because I'm not that much of a person. I feel that this lesson was a bombshell thrown on top of me, and I have looked at this thing and I have meditated, and as Becky said, I've lived with it for over a month, and she's tried to live with it too. Now let me tell you why. Those of you that know Becky and I know that we are both retired teachers. So what does a teacher do when he gets out his syllabus? The first thing he does, he says, they look at the thing and say, what's the problem? Well, if you base this on the members who avoid the appearance of evil, the problem is very simple. Satan. All right, then the next thing you're going to do, you're going to analyze the situation and figure out, what do I do now? Well, you get out of his way. So now you got the whole lesson, I'm done. Now see, this is what a teacher does. A teacher looks at it, examines it, tears the thing apart, and puts it back together. Now the rest of it, it's like I got a skeleton, now I got to start putting the muscles on, I got to put the skin on, then I got to put the clothes on it, and when it's all done, I hope you got a decent thing out of this, and if you don't like it, you tell me, and if you do like it, why, tell somebody else. Now, when I say the problem is sin, you want to put the first picture up? Jesus is out here and he wants to help us. The disciples, you, all of us, are out here in a boat. We're getting rocked to and fro in the power of the storms. We're living among the storms. It's rocking us all the time. Every so often, one of us gets very daring, very filled with faith, very willing to try something new. And what do? We step out of our comfort zone. We take a step. But oh, please, please, people, when you take that step, keep your eye on Jesus. Keep your eye on Jesus. Poor Peter, look at him. What happened? Very simply, he took his eye off Jesus. And the minute you take your eye off Jesus, then we got problems. There's the problem of the Christian trying to avoid evil when you get your eye off of Jesus. Now I want to share some things with you. The devil, like a roaring lion, wanders about seeking whom he may desire. See, he's out here looking for you and me. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast which the Lord had made. And then we read in 2 Corinthians, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. He's counterfeit because Jesus is the source of light. Yesterday, Becky walked to the kitchen, went over to the sink. Stan, come here. And I went to her and she was white as a sheet. Out there on the tree right outside of the window was this nasty little snake, came up on the tree and was looking right in the window at her. And she was white as can be. She said, well, yeah, I got to do something. Okay, so I took the wasp spray out there and sprayed it. He just looked at me and says, you crazy thing. So I got a hoe and I said, chop, 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 chop. He finally fell down and he came right at me. And I chop, 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 and he still kept coming. And I chop, chop, and he still kept coming. Finally, I killed him. You see, it's hard to get rid of the devil. He'll come after you too. and you've got to come at everything there is. You may turn white when you see him. So I often wonder how in the world Eve was able to stand up to him in that way and just smart aleckly as it was, go through what she did. Now, what's my objective to this lesson? Very simple. I want to make it a little easier for you to get through life, to get to heaven. And if we can do that, then this thing will be a success. I'm going to go back to and look into history, because Paul told the Romans and he told the Corinthians, there's a reason why you go back into history. To the Romans he said, for whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the Scriptures might have hope. Then he told the Corinthians, now these things were our example, to the intent we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted, referring to the children of Israel when they wanted to have a golden calf and they wanted to eat, drink, be merry, and have a great time. They too were out, and Jesus and everybody is trying to say, help me, help me. Do you ever stop to think that's why we have elders? So we have somebody to go to when we say, help me. You are here and you are under the eldership of people who are willing to help you. You know, I want to share something with you, because to some of you, you don't know where I'm coming from in this till I get into it. Look up here on the front of the table. Now, I'm going to go back and give you a history of this congregation, and I'm going to tell you why. If it wouldn't be for a person and people who said to the Lord, help me, we wouldn't be here tonight. And some of you don't even know where this church came from. There was a man, Newt Greer, and Rebecca Garland, that lived up in Tennessee, in Ashland City, Tennessee, just 20 miles from Nashville on the Cumberland River. He had a fine job. He was down on the Cumberland River. He was a supervisor of the people who were loading the steamboats that were coming up and down the river. He had a very fine job, but he also was very, very serious, very, very frugal, and very, very looking to the future. He saved up until he got enough money to buy 500 acres at $1 an acre, 10 miles up Pond Creek. He moved up there to Pond Creek in 1906, just a little ways away from his wife's mother. You know what the first thing was that he got involved in? He built a church so they could come together to worship. Now, if you want to avoid evil, you need to get a congregation and groups of people who will come together and worship. So this is what he did. And they stayed there for quite a few years. But the area that he bought up there was a little valley, but up on the two sides were hills. Now you try to farm up on a hill when you take a plow and a mule and you try to go up here and plow. And the poor thing that Newt found out is that there was lots and lots of rocks everywhere. And he was forever taking these rocks out and trying to put them over here for the fence and put them over here for the fence and try to get them out so he could have some ground. One day there was a young fellow in 1906, a Mr. Oeser, who came through the area to court a girl. But when he came, he had a piece of newspaper with him. He gave that newspaper to Newt Greer. Newt Greer, loving to read and see what else he could find in there, started fanning through the whole thing. And lo and behold, here's an article. It said, down in Alabama, you will find 1,720 acres available land for $19 an acre. Boy, this thing started turning in his head. Now, wait a minute. That's not mountain. That's down below. Now, you see, the very first building there is the first church that was built. That's where it all started. Now, after he gets this newspaper, and he reads and studies about this, he comes down here in January. Now, he gets this in November Immediately in January, he's on his way coming down here. He walks the territory, sees where it is, and out on the lower Wares Ferry Road, you'll find that the home place is still there. It's still in the hands of the Greers, and it's still being farmed, and it's still being taken care of, and some of the relatives are still living in the old original house. Now, that amount of land was too big, but here's the real problem that Mr. Greer ran into. I've got a family, and a family has to have friends. What kind of friends? You need Christian friends. So what did he do? He talked and he talked and he talked until he got a group of people together who said, we'll go. Here they are. Mr. and Mrs. J.H. Hale, who had a community general store. See, here comes a buyer-seller. Mr. and Mrs. L.L. Jones, a well digger and a preacher. See, he's looking out for this family. Mr. and Mrs. James Evans, the county ag agent, to look over the ground and see that everything is just exactly right. Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Moore, a farmer. His wife was Pappy's sister. And then Mr. and Mrs. Edward Reagan. Now in November of 1919, they start moving down here. It takes them 2 weeks to get from Nashville to here. The other week, we went up to Indiana to visit the relatives, and Becky and I had all we could do because we wanted to make it in 5 hours. But back then, it took them 2 weeks to get here. After they got here, they went to the Henderson house in Wetumpka, lived in the house in there, started going to church in the people's houses. You see, they weren't forsaking the assembly. They were meeting together. And as they met together, things began to slowly happen. As they did all this, they got the land. They divided the land into 5 equal spots. And then they asked, who wants the house? Nobody wanted the house, so Newt Greer bought the house, and he added that to his amount of land. So each one of them had 340 acres, plus he got 23 acres in the home place. Now, what's the next thing they do? They start meeting in the homes, vacant houses. They hold their church service, and then they finally went over here in Chisholm area to where this, let's see, I wrote this down, the Cedar Grove, which is now where Park Plaza Center is. They put up a tent and immediately started worshiping. Mr. and Mrs. Brady came and joined them. So now you got another family into the congregation because you are busy trying to do what you should do, seeking help, and the Lord is helping those that work and help themselves. So now after they do this, they get into an old store building and meet there for a while. Then they go into the home of Mr. and Mrs. Ferguson. Here comes another family into the church. Now in 1925, they build a building. The small little building there behind is the first building we had in town. Then in 1941, they really got daring. You know what's beginning to happen on the world scene about then? World War II. Try to buy supplies. Try to get things. Almost impossible. But again, praying to the Lord, help me, they build the next building. Do you notice what it is? It's a 2-story building. Well, that's scriptural. You remember when Paul was talking in Troas up in the upper floor, and the little boy was sitting by the window, boing, he falls out because he fell asleep one night? Well, they had a 2-story building. The group met on the top up above. The classrooms met down below. All right? They stayed in this until time was on. They finally got into another building on the lower Wetumpka Road, which is still there. You can still go out and see the building, except the lady that's a preacher there has put so many additions around it, painted so many colors, you wouldn't recognize it for anything. It's something else. Then, in about 1960, they moved over here to Fairground Road, the one in the very, very middle. Stayed there until finally there was a real crisis because in the neighborhood it was getting very, very hard to go out door knocking. It really wasn't, the neighborhood was just plain changing. Why did it change? Because there was a Brockway glass company that closed up and all the workers started moving to other places and other people started moving into the neighborhood. Then from there, they built the building over here on the side. We worshiped over there for a long time. And now look what we got. Why? Because some people had a vision, Some people wanted to avoid evil, and they knew that if we came together to worship, then you could strengthen each other, encourage each other, and bring people to where we need to be. And so what has this congregation been doing? It continues steadfast in the apostles' doctrine, in fellowship, breaking of bread, praying, praising God, favor with all the people, and the Lord added to the church daily such as should be saved. It works when you go and ask for help like this. Now, put on there the one with the carpenter. I'm going to share something with you. I just got done sharing with you about building. You know, God in his infinite wisdom knows exactly what he's doing. When he put Jesus down on this earth, he gave him an earthly mother, and he gave him the most wonderful stepfather, Joseph. Now, what was Joseph? He was a carpenter. So what did Jesus get to do? He learned how to work with his hand. He learned how to boom, 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 bang, 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 saw, 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 make things smooth, sand, 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 work, 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 nail things together, build things, put them together. He probably learned finances. He learned architectural drawing. He learned it all. He was a master of this whole thing. I presume that everything Joseph taught him, it worked. And as he grew up, it kept on going. You know, when he was a preacher, later on in his latter years, there's actually 4 stories he talks about that are related to his carpentry and his building. Remember the story in Luke about count the cost? You know, the smart man that said, I'm going to build a big tower. So he goes down to the bank and he gets his loan. He buys his land. He gets all his finances in order. He gets his foundation laid in order. He gets the pillars drilled. He gets everything finished. And he starts building, he gets all the contractors together, and all of a sudden, whoops, he didn't plan it right. He didn't have enough money. And he never finished the tower. And what did Jesus say? The people mocked him. Dear people, Jesus knew what he was talking about when he talks about carpentry and building things. He said, you better count the cost. Count the cost of what it costs to be a Christian and to avoid evil. You may go off on the wrong track if you don't count the cost and stay true to exactly what you're supposed to do. Then another thing, he told another story about soil testing. He said there was another fine man that he had the perfect vision, the perfect view. He went down along the beach side and he saw the sandy area and he said, I'm going to build me a house. Little did he realize the flood may come, the tornadoes may come, the hurricanes may come, everything may come, the sign may wash out from underneath him, and the whole house will ka-bonk. And he has nothing. Then Jesus said, but there was another guy. Now he went out and he didn't look exactly for the view. He first checked his soil until he found a rocky place. When he got that, he built the foundation on it, then he built the house on it, and you know the storms came and everything just held up real fine. Then he told another story. You ever read the story about the fixer-upper? You know, on TV, I don't know how many of you watch the movie where they flip houses. Oh, this fixer-upper, this is one of my good stories. I love it. He talks about the heart, but if you get back and put it into a carpenter's point of view, what you got here is a man who fixes up a house, makes the thing just perfect. Everything is just nice as can be. He paints it, he does everything. Then he puts it on the market and he can't find anybody to buy it. Maybe he's got too much money to invest, I don't know. But he can't find anyone to buy it. What does the scripture say that Jesus said about what happened to that empty house? 7 evil spirits move in worse than what there was in the first. See, no doubt when the man bought the house in the first place as a fixer-upper, he had to get all the squatters out of there. But now he can't fill the thing out, and the squatters go back in. The homeless people go back in. Oh, you don't know what that means, do you? Maybe you get the newspaper, maybe you don't. Just out here on going close to my mind is slipping on me. On Maxwell, if you go out here, there's a house in a housing development, but the house is still standing because it's a great house. They've gone in and taken care of this house. The inside has been fixed all up, but they can't find anything to do with it. So what happens? Homeless people are sleeping out there and going into the house. So what happens with your heart if you don't take care of it and you don't fill it up right? In moves these horrible, worse things than came out in the first place. What kind of stuff? Well, if you look into Proverbs, there are 7 abominations that the Lord hates. a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, hearts that devise evil, feet running swiftly to mischief, a false witness that speaks lies, sows discord among the brethren. You see, that's totally opposite of what Jesus wants. Jesus wants the goodness of our life to move into our heart, stay in our heart, and occupy us. This is why you come to church, because you need this kind of help. There's one other story. Of course, he closes out toward the end of something in his life, and I just make this in passing to show you there are four of them. And that is that he said, I'm going to leave you one of these days, and I got big work to do when I get there. I'm going to heaven. I'm going to build some mansions. I'm going to build some rooms. I'm going to build some places for you. And I'm going to come back and get you. You got a good place going. That's what you and I are after. We are after things like this because we feel that that is our vision. And so the carpenter is working to make our life better. Let me have the other slide now on the temptations. You and I are very, very familiar with the fact that Jesus was out in the wilderness and he had three major temptations. But do you realize that he had temptations like all of us have temptations? He has been tempted in like manner, just like unto us. Now get what I'm saying. I didn't say he sinned. I didn't say he said he did something wrong, but he had temptations like us. And that's hard for people to understand. You know, there's about 25 times in the Bible that's very, very evident that temptations were thrown at him. And he had to challenge himself. You see, you and I are growing in our life, and daily we have temptations that come our way. And these temptations have to be fought with all the time. Now, Jesus was able to take the temptation and throw them away. But you and I can fall into a trap. And you can get into a trap so easy that nobody knows anything about it. You remember what happened to Rachel when Jacob wanted to leave Laban and go home? His sweet wife that he loved so much reached over into Daddy's little worship center, picked one of the little idols up, and stole it from Daddy. They were joggling along and going along, and Daddy realized that they had slipped out on him, came after the whole tribe, looked for them, and said to Jacob, "Somebody has stole my idol." Well, Jacob didn't know anything about this. See, there's the problem. There's secret sins that you and I may be a part of that only you know anything about. Your mate may not know about it. Nobody else may know about it. But it's there. Jacob turned around and told daddy-in-law Laban, "Go look for it." So he searched everywhere in the caravan. When he got to Rachel, he said, "Rachel, what do you know about the idol?" "Daddy, I don't know anything about the idol." "Well, get down and let me search everything." "Oh, no, Daddy. This is my time of the month that, no, you're not going to touch me." And you know what it says just a verse or so later? He never found it. Are you and I harboring secret things that nobody has found? That's avoiding, and that's getting trapped into the evil. And that's not where we're supposed to be. You see, as I said, Jesus got involved with this kind of stuff. You remember when he cleansed out the temple? He could have walked up to that temple and said, "You people want to make money in the temple? Go ahead. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. I'll just go another way." He could have been trapped there in a temptation of trying to make money on the property. When what did Paul say? On the first day of the week we should put it together and have it so that when people come and need the money, nobody has to come looking for it and asking for it again. Remember when he went and talked to the woman at the well? Where were the disciples when he was talking to the women? They said they had gone to get some food. Jesus was all alone with a prostitute. Jesus could have fallen into a temptation right then and there so easily. But what did he do? He turned this thing round and did what is right. And he taught the woman and gave her the living water. But it doesn't end there. She went back into town and told the town, and the town came out to see him, and he had an opportunity to preach the gospel or teach his message to the people of the town. You see, he didn't fall into this kind of a trap. You remember when he was healing on the Sabbath? You know, there were traditions and there were codes. He broke the traditions, he broke the codes, but he didn't break God's law. He had a humane interest in human beings to make you better. Even today, when you're sick and you pray and you plead that the doctors have the knowledge and the wisdom, the healing, the day is not the thing. It's what happens and how you take care of it. You remember when he was on the boat and the storms came? He could have left his disciples just go crashing with that old thing, but he didn't. He took care of them. He helped Peter. He helped him when he was sleeping on there, and they turned around and says, "Master, there's a storm out here. We're going to drown." He just got up and, "Peace, be still." Okay. That was the end of that. Jesus loves people, and time again he had a chance to fall into temptation, but he didn't do it. What about paying taxes? You know, so many people think, and I hear people say this all the time about people that cheat on their taxes. What'd Jesus do? They came into a town, didn't have any money to pay the taxes, and the tax guy was out there waiting for him. He turned around and told one of the disciples, "Hey, look, go down to the river, lake, get the fish, bring the fish to me, open up the mouth, you'll find the tax money, pay him. Now we'll go into town." Remember another time they tried to trick him about paying taxes? He said, "Give me a coin." They gave it to him. Heads. Whose head's on there? Caesar. Pay him. Boy, Jesus was honest. You couldn't get him trapped in anything. You can dig this thing through over and over and over and over. And he just doesn't get himself in a trap. He had the disciples who got into a big fuss and argument. Who gets to be the greatest? Ego, big ego. No, he wouldn't fall for that. He had a chance to be the king. He went into town one day and they turned around and they said, "Hosanna." They turned around and put the palm branches down, everything. He had everything going for him. But he said his kingdom isn't of this earth. His kingdom is the church. He didn't fall into that trap. Over and over and over, he did not fall into it. Yeah, finally, you say, "Well, the devil got him. He died." Devil only got him for 3 days if you look at it that way, because he rose again. He was the victor. Jesus did not fall into temptations. Temptation was not something he could do. There's another story I want to share with you. In the Old Testament, in the first chapter of 1 Kings, there's a man by the name of Adonijah. This man is a young boy. Now, what's interesting about this is that Steve has been giving us a series of lessons on David. I talked to him the other day about this, and so I wouldn't be stepping on his toes or cleaning up something he wanted to do and go on from there. And he told me he wasn't going to go into this. But anyway, Adonijah was a handsome young man. He was the son of David. He happened to be the oldest son left. You see, Ammon had lost his life, Solomon had lost his life, and the other boy, there's one other boy in there that we don't know anything about. It just says that he was born to Abigail and David, but nothing is recorded about him. So we have here Adonijah, who is the oldest boy that David has. Now, in his growing up, it says in there, as you start reading in there, his daddy never once disciplined him. Never once disciplined him. Boy, you want to find a way to lead into temptation, just take a kid and do nothing with him. Just let him go off on his own. And you've got yourself a problem and a half. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Well, this boy grows up, and knowing he's the oldest one left, watching what happened to Absalom and the coup that Absalom tried to do to get over and take over the kingdom, he gets it in his big old head, I am going to be king. I am somebody good. I'm going to be king. Next is me. So finally, when the day comes that Daddy is old, senile, maybe he has Alzheimer's, maybe he has dementia, all we know is that he is coming closer to death. And Bathsheba and some others go looking, and they bring this sweet little girl, Abishag, into the court and bring her in there as a young nurse to take care of Daddy. But Adonijah, he gets this big head, I'm going to be king, and so he goes to the priest. He tells the priest, I want you to help me. He goes to Joab, who is the charge of all the military. I want you to help me. He gets the whole group of people together, and he gets a whole bunch of the soldiers together, and he says, I want to be king, and on such and such a day, we're going to go down to the royal park just south of town, and I'm going to throw the feast like you've never seen. We're going to have fat oxen, we're going to have fat lambs, we're going to just do the thing upright, and I'm going to become king. Boy, did he have this thing figured out. He got everybody together, but did he ever goof? You see, when you try to sin, you don't figure everything out. What did he mess up on? Number one, he never went to Daddy and talked to Daddy and says, Daddy, can I be king? Two, he never got the keys to the royal palace where the throne was. Three, he never got the people down there in the stable to take care of the mule that he could get hold of the mule. Four, he never got the people to go into the closet and get the royal robe out. He just took a big ego, went down there and had a great big feast, and the feast was going. And then it all blows up. Give me the last slide, please. Remember me. Every Sunday when you take the Lord's Supper, you remember me. Why does he want you to remember him? I want you to watch this story now. Nathan is in the palace. Nathan has just got a news break over the TV. He's just got a formal tweet that came in. And you know what it said? Adonijah has just claimed himself king. Remember me. Nathan the prophet goes back to Psalm 119:11. Thy word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against thee. Immediately his head is clicking. God, didn't you say Solomon was going to be the next king? Didn't David affirm that he was going to be the next king? Doesn't everybody know that he's going to be the next king? I remember what God said. So I ask you, do you remember what God said? He's given us a whole Bible to tell us what he said. Immediately he goes to Bathsheba because Bathsheba has access, direct access to the king, and says, Bathsheba, we got a problem on our hands. Number one, if he becomes king, you and Solomon are going to be killed. The other thing is, he's going to be the king, and everything is going to go haywire, and it's not going to be right. And that's not what God said, because God said Solomon is going to build the temple. Bathsheba says, what do you want me to do? He says, go to David and tell David. She got herself all fixed up. Very humbly, she walks to his presence. Abishag is in there with David. Abishag gets over to the side. This is the sweet little nurse. It says here, watch this, this is beautiful. She bows down until her head touches the floor. She respects her husband. You remember Sarah called Abraham Lord. She respects her husband. In doing so, David says, what do you want? She lays out this whole plot, tells exactly what has been happening, what is going on, and says, this thing has got to stop. Now, David is a wonderful man. He's a man after God's own heart. He's a man, when he dealt with Abigail, Abigail turned around and told him what to do and what not to do, and he listened. He does take advice. And so he listens to Bathsheba, and immediately he issues a decree, an executive order. Solomon will be king. Oh, Bathsheba is so relieved. He will be king. Now, this is what I want you to do. Go get the priest. Oh, you say the real priest is down there with Abishag? Well, get the second priest. I want you to get the royal guard who guards the palace. Take those soldiers, and I want you to get all these people, and you go down to where the ark is right now and where the tabernacle is that I have built, and I want you to get in there and get the royal oil out. I want you to put it on his head. I want you to put him on the royal mule, put the garment on him, and run him back to the palace, open up the palace, and get him on the throne. And they did that. And it says the people began to pipe. They began to make such a big noise that way down there in the park, they heard all this. Whoops, we got ourselves a candidate down here that was running for election. He just lost the whole election. Did you watch on TV when some of these people lost the election and all of a sudden the room people just left? Well, it says here, these people just left. He was all alone. But now what does David do? David, in his humility, even though he is on his bed or however they got him in there, in his old age, he does obeisance to Solomon, declares him the king. He abdicates his throne, kind of like Nixon did to Agnew many, many years ago. He abdicates and turns it over to Solomon, and Solomon becomes the king. Now, I close it up with this, because there's some reason you are avoiding evil. The wages of sin is death. The wages of sin is death. And that's why you're avoiding evil. Abishag goes back home. He's pouting, he's sulking, he grabs hold of the horns on the altar. And they take him back to Solomon, and he says to Solomon, "Don't kill me." Solomon says, "I won't if you act right." Well, he goes home and he starts to sulk and pout, and he comes up with a master plot. This is plan B. I want the little girl as my wife. She should be my wife. And so he goes to Bathsheba, and he says, "Bathsheba, got a favor to ask of you. You know, we've been pals all these years. I know you're the mama to Solomon, and he's just been a little nerd. I couldn't stand him all his life. He's been a brainiac, but he really doesn't need to be king. I'm supposed to be king, but I understand he's king now, and that's the way it is. But go tell Solomon, I want little Abishag for my wife." "Okay, I'll do that." So she goes into Solomon. Now watch this. When she goes into Solomon, Solomon gives her honor as mother. And he comes in and tells the story of what he wants. And first, Bathsheba said, "Will you agree to what I ask?" "Yes." So Bathsheba thinks this is okay. We're going to have a little wedding here, and that's going to take care of everything. But as soon as she tells Solomon exactly what it is, "What? No. If they get married, that means that the kingship passes on to him." Maybe you don't understand that, but you go back and read what Solomon did, or Absalom did, when he drove David out of the palace and drove him out of Jerusalem. What did he do to the concubines? You see, if Abishag marries her, he could potentially become the king because he now has the king's wife. Immediately, Solomon, in his great wisdom, looks down to the palace bodyguard, "Go out there and execute him. The wages of sin is death." He took care of him. Dear people, I tell you this. Remember the scriptures when it says, "Thy word have I hid in my heart that I may not sin against thee." This will help you avoid evil. This will make your life go better. It's really, the choice is yours. You remember Johnny Carson? He had a dumb little saying all the time. Us old people will enjoy this. He would say that every so often you have to walk down the road and you come to the fork in the road. This is what you and I are. We're at the fork in the road. You can take the straight and narrow way, or you can take the broad and wide way that leads to destruction. It's all up to you. But Jesus loves you, and Jesus wants you to take this road. This is why we have elders here, to oversee us. They work hard to get us to the point that we can get to heaven someday. It is up to us to be loyal and faithful to them. I tell you, if you have done things that trouble you, secret little sins, and you feel that you need the prayers of the congregation, oh, there's help here. There's great help. And when you look at that picture and say, remember me, remember Jesus. He is watching. If you've never been a part of this congregation and you'd like to be added to the church, and you confess and you're baptized for the remission of your sins, this also can put you in here in the right relationship. As we sing this last closing song, may you do what you feel you must to make your life the way it should be. The Lord is interested in me, and he's interested in you.